Good evening, everyone. I wasn't sure whether to postpone this live stream as people gather to hear about the news regarding Frank. This, unfortunately, is an opportunity for narcissistic people to take advantage of everyone's emotions and capitalize from it. I find this type of thing disgusting and in no way paying respects. It is abusing someone who is no longer with us. So I think Frank would want us to continue with the work because to him, he wanted to help men. And with his blessing and with him in our hearts and minds, wanting the best for us, let us go into the lesson of making a stand for yourself. We have a lot to get through this evening. Like the previous stream about credentials, something that seems so small, this one is another Pandora's box of explanations. So, what's in a name? A narcissist confession. Names have meaning, even if we're not aware of why we give them. And likewise, if there is a name you dislike, you're less likely to use it because of what it means or reminds you of. And this is why I find this area of subject interesting, because it's unlikely benign. And upon hearing a name, you already start to make abstractions. You must have noticed this habit. So names have meaning. Now, why in particular would a narcissist give themselves a derogatory name? Surely you would think a narcissist, being full of themselves, would want something mighty, grandiose. Sometimes they do, and you can see why they do this quite easily. But the downgrade might appear unexpected. It is, in effect, to mask more efficiently or effectively. And narcissists love their hidden meaning. So whatever face value you're being told is a lie, a cover-up. The cunning do not put something powerful because, firstly, they know it's easily seen as hollow. And secondly, people would laugh at them and not really side with them. You see, the cunning need people on their side. So with the more grandiose, it's bad enough with them calling themselves something like, I don't know, the Narc Wrecker or the Narc Champion or something really, you might as well call yourself the Supreme Big Head and be done with it. But if you thought those grandiose names were already egotistical, this self-inflicting derogatory name is even more superior. It's hard to believe, but it is. Because their greatness is so great, it must be obscured from us mere mortals. No one must know that God-level power walks among them. So he hides himself by what he thinks people would take no notice of. The wolf hides as not just a sheep, but a meek, low sheep. Unsuspecting. Well, you are left unsuspecting. So this form of name, this downgrade name, is more predatory in its formation. And in this way, makes that person feel more superior. They have the advantage. Now, they can't keep this special secret just to themselves. They need to release some of this tension by teasing and flaunting you with it. You may notice this grandiosity seeps out through their smugness, or in particular, their duper's delight. Sometimes they are feeling so full of it that they themselves have to rein in their greatness, because they're aware excessiveness would blow their cover and will push people away. So this is tricky for them to regulate, and is seen when they are self-promoting. They get caught in the moment of self-gratifying. Figuratively speaking, they're masturbating. They, even being aware of this, they take no responsibility for their behavior. And as part of their grandiosity, it must be displayed at some point. Now, narcissists will pretend to be humble to counterbalance this, and depending on how well they control this will determine if they are a lesser or more of a mid-range narcissist. The lesser grade of narcissists don't really care about public perception and will just unapologetically proclaim they're a 10 plus when really they're like a 2. The lesser they will use derogatory names as a form of pride, earning a title of the greatest of the worst. So grandiosity is on full display with them. This isn't so much to mask from the public eyes and fool the world, rather is to mask from their own inner shame and fool themselves. So the lessers are obnoxious and pig-headed bulldozers in that regard. The more mid-range narcissist, mainly what we're discussing here, are more coy and conniving. They need to blend in so that they can be undetectable. And it's that which is at their forefront. And at the other end of the scale, the greaters would just simply be too embarrassed to have to stoop to these playground kind of level of stunts. So, in much the same way, grandiose names are that which they wish they were. Degrading names are that which they are and don't want to be, a fool, essentially. So I'll repeat that. So, in much the same way as grandiose names are that which they wish they were, they want to be, degrading names are that which they are and don't want to be. They end up becoming their own worst enemy. As such, if they declare they're a bit of a Fruity Loop, it is because they are. Do not be put off by the absurdity of simplicity. If they divulge they were nuts as well as a snake, a liar, a crook, and a thief, and whatever else, that's giving away too much power. They're not trying to tell you the whole truth, just a little, so that you can slip into their alternative way of thinking. Because once you laugh along with them and not seeing it as shame, you're not far from being totally deluded. So like a child, with children, this behavior is something you might expect to see when they recite what they've been described as. And you can see in children that they are stung by hurtful words said to them. And it stings at their identity. Identity being a theme here for this discussion. And kids will do this to each other, not realizing how painful words can be. And a kid will hold on to this because they haven't built up enough life experience. So their circle of influence is small. This makes painful words mean the world to them. Now, as adults, we can say things in passing, but to children, it carries weight. So if you said to a child, "Stop being stupid," they they interpret it as, "I am stupid." The kid remembers this and won't forget. Now, consequently, narcissists hold a grudge. So something non-important to you might become a basis for them to enact some revenge and set the record straight in their eyes. And this can be seen with things like the Hoover attempts. Hoovers aren't just about recycling ex-lovers. The narcissist hasn't forgotten you. They are unable to move on, and is part of this stunted and maladaptive disorder. Good evening, gentlemen who are coming in. Okay, we'll move into the area of perception, devaluation. There's going to be a few different concepts woven together here. Now, you'd have to be a bit of a dummy to call yourself a fat narcissistic cult leader. You wouldn't joke by calling yourself a pedophile or a murderer because you know how bad this would be. A name such as the Pedo King wouldn't be as easily devalued and too much in bad taste. This is why the label or the name of narcissist shouldn't be said lightheartedly. It's no fucking joke. But because narcissists are trying to take the sting out of the term, this name and image that's being created, they fail to see how it's not something you should be then proud of. So they brandish it around. And this is a result because narcissists don't have good discernment. So they can't tell when they're being facetious or just plain stupid. And by the way, this lack in understanding appropriate behavior is linked to their lack in cognitive empathy. Ergo, a mid-range or lesser narcissist, more so with the lesser, who are a total loss and would just stare. But regardless, all narcissists are incapable of emotional empathy. This is how to spot whether their promotional charity work, their fundraising, their get-togethers, their gatherings, group hug type stuff, is whether or not it's genuine or not, because they do not have the emotional empathy. They can only act out this using whatever level of cognitive empathy they have. It's a simulation, an approximation of what they believe is appropriate. Now, sometimes, especially with the lower grade of narcissists, they get this wrong. Someone falls over and they break a leg and they're in excruciating pain. They crack out laughing. Something like that. But this is why they do not know how to appropriately behave, not just in emotional regards, but in terms of ethics and mannerisms and conducting themselves. And this is why you'll see things like, they bring on the violins and the crocodile tears. And I suppose upon hearing me spill the beans, they will now work on their acting skills to combat this revelation. So you might start noticing people, especially if they're familiar with my channel and what we're discussing here, start to try and become better actors. But remember, it's just a simulation. It's not genuine. It will seem artificial. But Being called a narcissistic leader, if for someone to have been called one, and then echoing it back in retaliation to be flippant, also indicates that person doesn't actually understand narcissism and is projecting out a confession that has been pulled out of them. Too dumb to realize they've outed themselves and prove it themselves as true. Their level of arrogance is through the roof. It's like what they're trying to communicate back to who they deem as the aggressor, who has given them this name. They're trying to communicate that you might have seen behind my mask, but I'm going to get away with it and I'm going to rub it in your face. It's like, haha, I scoff at your attacks and I just absorb them. Now, normal people wouldn't do this kind of behavior, not unless they wanted to be a bit petulant about it. Where they dig themselves a deeper hole, particularly with a name such as narcissistic in the title there. Cult leader just adds insult to injury. But would victims of narcissistic abuse appreciate seeing someone call themselves a narcissistic cult leader? And there are many of those victims in these spaces and entire communities of them. Is it wise or cute to make yourself an enemy to all of those people? Now the narcissist may say, oops, I didn't realize. Of course not. And that will be because they're a narcissist and they're too busy trying to fool people. That's why they didn't think about the ramifications. And besides, why would a narcissist care how other people would take that? They're too busy, along with trying to fool people, they're too busy seeking reassurance from their enablers. A little applause for being cute. And these enablers, try as they might, don't really help in reducing this fear of losing control. This is one of the reasons why they're doing this, is to retain their control. But these enablers aren't really helpful in reducing that fear. Or are they really of much use in elevating esteem? And so the narcissist despises their own followers, their own enablers. Now, if you're one of those people who think this name choice isn't alarming, the narcissist is laughing at you for being so gullible. Let's move into the area of sensitivity. Now, narcissists will claim something like they do this kind of mucking around because people take themselves too seriously and they're just having fun. So it's to make themselves appear more robust and that their ego is able to handle criticisms. Water off a duck's back, thick skin. You, on the other hand, are uptight and bitter. It's supposed to convince you that you can't hurt them. Now, I got this from somewhere else. I can't remember the source, but credits to whoever this next line here. This essentially is a quote. So, to avoid additional criticisms by undermining oneself, he proves he is the master of his own fate. Continuing on. So, donning the name doesn't equate to you having a thick skin. It actually signals a thin skin. Because they could have simply ignored and not have adopted the name. But the problem with this is that doesn't address the threat it has caused. So it's a subtle sign it does indeed bother them, and they're just lying when they pretend to be cool about it. This shows the ego is highly sensitive. It's a bluff. And you will find further, whenever we talk about narcissism, you can't just have one incident and say, bingo, I found myself a narcissist. You need to kind of compliment, but you need to put your pieces together. So you'll find other little evidence of this. It will be quickly revealed when you say something or criticize them that they are very sensitive. You could be talking about a topic and it will become quickly revealed with their level of paranoid brain thinking. They'll believe you're personally talking about them, and they'll center your whole discussion purely around them. Me. A funny kind of this one makes me sort of laugh. So if you were to say that you would tell complete morons to fuck off, they would step forward thinking you've told them personally to fuck off, effectively placing themselves into that category of moron. You know that kind of joke when you're in a crowded room and you shout out, "Hey, stupid," and someone turns around thinking you're talking to them? It's like, well, there you go. You nominated yourself. I didn't call you a moron. You did that of your own accord. So then to quickly contrast, they may say something like, oh, they don't care about external validations. That's kind of funny because you seem to get upset at the idea of being a moron. Again, don't ever believe what a narcissist tells you. This is that kind of contradictory way of style of speaking, deflection. They overcompensate. Now, maybe figuratively speaking, you might have said, hey, you got their hands tied, but they will interpret it as you saying literally thinking that's what you meant. You see, narcissists have a problems with this interpretation, and it's built into them. So by twisting perception to fool themselves, they believe when they play their games of hidden meaning, they're adept at masking themselves. They think they are in some ways they are kind of they are master manipulators, but they're not as they end up kind of getting caught up in their own BS. But they have that lack of awareness and perception to know when they are setting themselves up for a fall. And ultimately, they also have this idea that they believe you are as much of a fool as they are because you are just an extension of themselves. So if I can trick myself into believing what I want to believe, then there's no reason why I can't trick everyone else. And everyone else is beneath me, so this should be a cakewalk. It should be easy peasy to trick everyone because look how easy it was to trick myself. But this is the trouble. Not everyone is an extension of the narcissist. Especially if you're not in their circle or proximity, you have distance, you can see it. Now, devalue is not enough. Distancing, I just mentioned, is also needed. So by joking and saying something like this is goofy and insinuating this isn't me, what they're trying to say is, I'm not really goofy. I'm just kind of clowning around. And in turn, that means I'm not a narcissist. And in doing this, they can then disassociate from the label and render it non-threatening. It's sort of like saying, take no notice, everyone. Everyone calls me an arsehole. Now, if someone were to call you an arsehole, it would mean nothing. So we're supposed to believe there is no merit behind a label being given towards someone. And if anyone new were to come across you, it wouldn't matter as much because it's already been devalued and nullified. Other names, avatars, thumbnails used are also to cope and to control perception, making it really deception, with a compulsion for accidental projections based in their fears and their esteem and their control, their insecurities. With this, there is an element of passive aggressiveness and a sinister smile beneath the surface that dupers delight as it tops up that esteem, thinking they're getting away with it. Every small boost is short-lived, like a junkie, because that's what they are. And it backfires because it reminds them of how sad they really are. And so another fix will quickly be required. And the way they go about this is they try to make themselves feel better by using or converting things that make them feel shame. They try to take the painful stuff, and they try to turn it into a positive. It's not how we would go about things necessarily, and it might not make sense to us, but for them, it is about retaining control, which is forever slipping. And it's their sensitivity to this pain, this shame, is what directs their behaviors, that need. So this is where they become a slave to their emotions. That is a compulsion, like a vampire needing the blood. Like it or not, they have to do this. And it should be fairly well known. I hope so. It's pretty well documented that narcissists have deep shame. And this idea that they love themselves in excess is a misconception and a poor definition if you were to look it up on Google, for example. So that's the old idea of the narcissist, someone who is vain, egotistical, and in excess love, admiration of themselves. This is a misconception. And this is what you're seeing taking place. You see how it's all self-absorption. This name, allocated a name, isn't really, as much as it is to fool people and to convince them and to manipulate and change perspectives and all this other kind of tomfoolery. It's all really due to their self-requirements and needs, issues that they're trying to address. Friends. Let's talk about Friends. No, not the TV show. So oversaturation with foolish names, a bombardment, also helps to numb the viewer from thinking too much about it. It might be made into a sort of game. Little do the players involved realize it is them that are being played. This isn't really a big deal unless we're talking about things with narcissistic context. And if so, which we are here, then this is a little indicator that orchestrating is taking place. And what I find dumbfounding is how players, enablers, associates, they'll retort, "Oh yeah, we knew he was a snake. He said it so many times." And then they act surprised when this snake eventually bites them and poison sets in. Now in agony and surprised at their betrayal, finally now it makes sense to them. And then they'll cry, "No one warned me." Yeah, it's all fun and games until it happens to you. And that's the oversaturation to further devalue and desensitize you to what is taking place. Conditioning, brainwashing, manipulation. So friends who allocate a cheeky name in the form of endearment, they do so with discretion. They're aware there is a fine line that cannot be exceeded. Being friendly means being responsible to not go so far when stepping over boundaries as to actually hurt the feelings or damage reputation. Now, intimacy allows for a little boundary crossing and build trust. This is why it's okay for friends to do it, but you are not. If you do it without first being welcomed into the inner circle, then automatically you are being insensitive by default, even if what you say is exactly the same as what their friend has said. It's all right for the friend, but not for you. Now, friends of the narcissist might notice this poor choice of name adoption, but they might not say anything and they just brush it off as a weird, odd joke because they're afraid pointing it out might cause embarrassment. But then they could also secretly be thinking it's quite fitting. So this thing becomes a bit of a taboo and a shared secret amongst, well, a shared secret creates a bond between this predator narcissist and their victims, making it harder for enablers, victims, friends, associates, or whoever's in that network to separate and individuate. Because if you carry a secret and you're bonded, then you will incur the pain of guilt, even though it's what even though like you will feel like you've betrayed their air quote trust. These are the silly little narratives you will tell yourself, which are untruths. These are falsehoods. The victims are the ones who police themselves and keep themselves on the hook through their own emotions of feeling guilt, feeling obligated, obliged. They don't want to feel like they're a betrayer. They don't want to feel like they lost the trust. You really think the narcissist trusted you? No. And there you are feeling bad that you betrayed their trust. So get your marbles in order or whatever you need to do. See things for what they are. Stop disabling yourself in order to, this is you trying to make the narcissist happy. It surely isn't making you happy. Anyway, now let's say you're not a friend. You're just a random schmuck or whatever. You're just a random guy. I won't say schmuck. You're just a random person, but you're the one who gave this name. Or maybe you summarized who they are and you've pointed it out. Now you might receive a kind of "you don't know me" response. And in some ways this is sort of true. But other people will see you, like quotes, that other people see you before you do. You are the last person to actually know thyself. Funny enough. How so? Because you've got a subjective viewpoint. You're inside your own head. Other people outside of you see you with objectivity. So they get to see what kind of person you are truly before you do. And this "you don't know me" expression is quite common. It's said very often. It's actually kind of laughable how these narcissists it's that sort of phenomena of like, do they read the same book, the same script, because they sound so identical. Well, but translation, when they say "you don't know me," what's the translation here? They're trying to say to you that you can't tell me who I am. But in this sort of scenario, it's kind of like, well, weren't you the one who adopted the name? You see that kind of short-sightedness? They call themselves a narcissistic cult leader. You point it out and they say, "You don't know me." It's like, well, you've kind of confessed to it. Now, if people have spent time in deciphering who you are, and they point out some noticeable traits in particular, It's for a reason. It's stuck out. It's prominent. And perhaps if you don't like it, maybe you shouldn't be doing the things that earn you that label. And of course, I'm not talking about silly names or trying to throw shit and see what sticks. I'm talking about those when the penny drop moments. And quite often, once it's aired out and other people hear it, they can see it too. They can see why that name was given. And if you're that person who's given that name, you've called out the wolf hiding as a meek sheep. Don't be surprised you're ridiculed, trolled, mocked, some kind of smear campaign, some kind of containment takes place because you've become a threat. You're a whistleblower. So, I mean, what other retort do they have at their disposal? They're not going to confront you about it. They might try, but their options are limited. Now, we'll do a separate stream on sort of trolling, mockery, ridicule, this sort of coping conversation. That'll be for another stream. Okay. Now, to have a bit of fairness here, for those who are like, I get sick of hearing about narcissists, including myself, to be fair. But some fun names are not always a sign of a narcissist. Okay, so we look at how sneaky, how the use of names can be like a tool of manipulation. Well, let's contrast it of how you get scenarios where this is not the case. Because sometimes the best way of telling who is a narcissist or who's narcissistic or when narcissism is at play is not actually by looking for the narcissism. Sounds kind of counterintuitive. It's looking at the comparison. An easy way of this, if you're into astrology, is you can't see a black hole, but you see the effects of a black hole. It's like I might not be able to see the abuser, but if I look at the victim and see how the victim is acting, they're enraged, they're emotionally all over the place, they've been gaslighted, then I can sort of deduct that something has caused this to happen. So you don't always necessarily need to have the narcissist in your grips or something like that. You can look at their influence around them. And as always, this means discernment. Discernment comes in again. Now, some people might make fun of themselves, and they're not a narcissist. So how can you tell this? Well, you'll need to look for other behaviors that are taking place. Evaluate how important their image, their reputation is to them. And do not believe the things like they don't care what other people think about. Like they'll say that I don't care what other people think about me, or I don't need people's validation. These are actually untrue statements in general anybody could make. Like it or not, what other people think of you does matter to an extent, because these help you to calibrate you within society. You were socialized when a child, and so it does influence you. You learn what is acceptable and not. Validation comes in many forms. Narcissists, perhaps, I don't know, they kind of need it more than anyone. And as one of these forms, like attention is a prime example. Simply talking, conversing with a narcissist is a form of validation, even if you're not giving them a biscuit. You need to understand what it is that constitutes their fuel and their supply. It's like the energy. Where are they getting the energy from? Your morals. I know a lot of people like to talk about their morals. If you were to have them, they don't just come out of thin air. They are commonly shared values that are agreed upon. Now, for a narcissist, these air quotes morals are entitlements. Anyway, I digress a little bit here. The point is never believe who you suspect is highly narcissistic to be telling you what you should be thinking. Be diligent. That being said, upon inspection, those without trying to fool you are not trying to hide something either. It's not so much about what you see, it's what you're not seeing. Kind of oxymoron here, but you need to be aware there are things you are not aware of. Now, if someone says, I was a bit of an idiot, I was wrong, maybe that's actually a bit of self-awareness and humility showing. You need to pay attention to the ease at which they do this. Are they embarrassed? Is there a bit of a gulp? Are they shy about it? Is there remorse? Is it genuine? Or is this a ploy to seem like a normal person and wanting you to lower your guard? So the age-old question, why? Why are they saying this? And another important question to be asking is, what do you want from me? Because if you're dealing with a narcissist, there is always something. So with that, understand what is of value. Narcissists work in transaction, currency, some sort of exchange. You need to bear this in mind. Because someone who is healthy, honest, genuine, true, they wouldn't be expecting anything from you. And a narcissist, clever, they're clever. They'll pretend, I don't want anything from you, but please subscribe, please like, please share my whatever. It's like, hang on. You see? This sort of forked tongue of theirs. It's like, I don't care about external validation. What did you just say about me? I hate you. It's like, I thought you don't care about external validation. It works both ways, validation / criticism. It's, I don't care about external opinion either way, validation or criticism. But lo and behold, yes, you do. Very much so. Now, maybe this kind of name subject, this making an ass of yourself, having a bit of a laugh, whatever. Maybe it's innocuous. Maybe it's a bit of branding. But then, in a way, narcissists are all about branding. They're actors. They're promotional. They're trying to put forward something that is not genuine, an alternative version of themselves. They keep the truth hidden. And this is why you might find it a bit hard to see these connections, is because you want things to be spelled out for you. Young minds, no offense, inexperienced minds, unskilled, this isn't something you're taught. It's not common knowledge. So young minds want things simple, clear, literal, Now, my autistic child has taught me this very well. If you say you're going to be 5 minutes, you better be 5 minutes. Don't be making it 10, because they get confused. And this is why, if you happen to be someone who sees things in black and white, then this would be a very difficult task for you. This would be harder for you to discern. And one of the reasons why narcissists have such a trouble with it, because they see in black and white. They think it's a good thing. You see, because normal people, even if they are using metaphors or innuendos or, abstract ideas, they are still honest about it. Both of you know what you're talking about. But narcissists try to cloak the hidden meaning, the alternative interpretation, and what they present is what they call the truth. They want you to accept as one version that they've told you. You're not allowed to think otherwise. You see, that will be another area of discernment, because someone who is being honest and genuine and upfront and all this with you, they're okay with you sort of interpreting it several ways, because whatever way you're going to interpret it is in an authentic, honest manner. They're not trying to manipulate you. You see how this works? The narcissist can only manipulate you if you're unaware that you're being manipulated, right? The con artist, the pickpocket, can only successfully steal from you if you don't know about it. So they have to keep it, don't look over there. Don't look in this hand, look in this other hand instead. And this is where things like, if they say, I am only human, or they are acknowledging, are they acknowledging that they mess up, or are they wanting to be let off the hook? Of course, the narcissist isn't going to be that obvious and say, "Oh, I want off the hook." They're gonna pretend to say, "Oh no, I mess up, I make mistakes, but hear me out. I'm 100% convinced I'm right on this." So hang on, you want us to believe you? Face value, right? No questions asked, but then out the other corner of your mouth, you're saying that you make mistakes and you could be wrong. There is a lack of consistency. And the trickier part to all of this is that it's one thing to notice whether or not something is wrapped in deceit, or maybe, someone's a bit insecure about something, so they inflate themselves in some sort of way. But the trickier part is, to what degree are they doing this, and the significance. How much of this does it matter? How important is it to this person? And so they say, if a narcissist shows you who they are, believe them. Make no mistake, it is not for your benefit. They are not being vulnerable to be friends with you. This offer of theirs of vulnerability is the same kind of ploy used in dating. You don't suspect the narcissist because they show you a bit of this vulnerable side. And often it's true. So here's another side lesson. Just because you're given some truth doesn't mean you should trust. So back to the dating example, because in the beginning, they may indeed tell you about their rough upbringing or some other kind of red flag, and you shouldn't be ignoring it. They're telling you this to test your integrity, to see how gullible you are, to see how much you will allow. So it's much more devious than, oh, it's just I told a little boo-boo or something like this. And if you need something to visualize this further, of how precarious of a situation you could potentially be in, I've heard it described, so this is kind of like another quote, I'm having to paraphrase it, but something like, what the narcissist does is they present you their inner child. You reach in, and as you do, the narcissist grabs you by your wrist. And this is the trap. The name, the avatar, the thumbnail, the collection of thumbnails of me, this promotional campaign of theirs. This is what's being used here as bait. Okay, so conclusions now. So these play on words, this spell magic word binding stuff, it doesn't have to be related to just the names. And so the lesson here I want to teach essentially is to be mindful and consider meta style of communication, the subtext, the silent words that are being used. The trouble is that this requires effort and be hard to notice. It could be tiring to always be vigilant, looking out. And it doesn't really feel nice to be. And this is why, if people are genuine and honest, they don't need to be psychoanalyzed because it's easy, you know. But the narcissist loves to use red herrings. Some other examples is they might say, for instance, they support free speech. Why would they say this? It's to make themselves appear open and tolerant. What they have is countermeasures to reassert control. So free speech becomes a trap. That's why they permit it. It helps them to spot out who are their enemies, and those that don't like what they have to say, they can be dealt with. There are procedures for such rebels. And really, I mean, this is leading into a conversation about doublespeak, which we'll discuss another time, so many topics to cover. But in the as such, doublespeak, I mean, really, this conversation we're having about names falls under the bigger topic of doublespeak, this playing of words, this dishonest communication. Now you might wonder, this might be a bit of a kind of hang on. If narcissists are based or preoccupied with a facade, an image, you know, messing around with perception and all this, then why wouldn't they just be upstanding citizens? You know, goody two shoes. I mean, do it legitimately. And to that, I would say, you mean earn it? You know, like playing by the rules doesn't give them that edge. It doesn't give them that sense of power, the entitlement. It doesn't satisfy it. So to them, they're entitled. They've already earned it. Being a team player is seen as a weak position. And even if everything was legitimately achieved and going well for them, there is still that need to be lucrative and exploitative, which ultimately will undermine their social standing. Think of someone who steals from their work when they don't really need to. They do it anyway. And if they were not to do that sort of thing, this would place them in their sort of mind, this would place them lower down in the hierarchy of survival. They need to be at the top. They need to step on people, push people beneath them. And how do you do that? You take. You don't give. So they're not going to give or contribute to society, not unless there was some sort of gain out of it. Now, this is where even I have to sort of spend some more time thinking about it, but maybe, again, this is due to their sort of warped sense of interpretation, which blocks out that potential risk of consequence, believing they're sure to get away with it. You know, some arrogance in there, deluded, they can play the system. But this philosophy, people like to talk about philosophy. Well, the narcissist has a philosophy of their own. This philosophy of theirs comes as a result of a few of these sort of things coming together. So I'm not too sure how much of this is really self-sabotaging. I'm not sure if that's really their intent. Maybe on one hand it is, but on the other hand, they're also compelled, and as a result, they overplay. No limits, no boundaries, so they overplay their hand. Anyway, I think there's a lot here for people to think about. So I hope this was informative. If any of you find yourselves in situations like we've been describing, which I expect is actually most of you, apply what you have learned here and see for yourself. What choice you make is your responsibility. And with that, thank you for being here and having a listen, and have a good night.